So we're going to get started, and we're going to be recording it, so there'll be time for questions at the end, but or throughout, but just so you know, we're recording this. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Andrea McFarland. I recently graduated from the MSW program, and I currently am here in Student and Alumni Affairs. And today we're going to be talking about school social work. We have two lovely alumni here who are going to be sharing their experiences, advice that they may have, and then also be able to answer any questions that you have about being a social worker in a school. So I have Kelly Heller, who's the coordinator of special services at Marion P. Thomas Charter School, and Sara E, who's the school counselor at the Kent Police School. So I just want to ask you two if you can give us a brief introduction of yourselves and your current roles, and then talk a little bit about your internships at Silver.
Good afternoon. My name is Sara, and I graduated from this program here in 2000. And a little bit of an overview of my career. I began in community mental health. From there, did some work in Partial Hospital, therapeutic nurseries, managed some school-based programs, and really came to the opinion that the best way to work with children and their families is really in a school setting. It still offers a holistic approach where you're with a wide variety of professionals, and you have the opportunity to work with students in real time, in their most natural environment, and to do a variety of things, from crisis intervention to faculty consultation, working with families, making referrals, and also there's an aspect of preventative care that can be done in a school setting. So that's really what I've come to enjoy. Additionally, I'm on faculty at Rutgers, where I teach in their MSW program, and I teach clinical social work with children and clinical social work 1 and 2.
My name is Kelly Heller. I graduated in 2010 from here. This is my second career. Before I became an MSW, I was a fashion designer for 20 years. And I came to this program strictly to be a school social worker. However, being a school social worker is not what I thought being a school social worker was, at least where I am. So by definition, I'm a school social worker. I've been in the same job since the day I graduated. I started part-time the next day, and I've been there ever since. I work in Newark, love it. But in terms of being a social worker, a good portion of my job is special education, which I have learned on the fly because I had no training in that here. I'm also the anti-bullying specialist, as required by New Jersey law, the 504 officer. But to echo what Sarah said, the majority of what I do is crisis intervention. I'm working with children and families in crisis. I do some work with faculty like you do, but that just kind of comes with being the only mental health professional in an elementary school of 505 students. But I will say that I love my job more than I thought I would, even though I have no idea really what my job is. And I think the best part of being a school social worker is kind of rolling with it. My office has been moved every year, and I think as a school social worker, you just kind of have to accept the fact that it's kind of always about change, and if you're craving a appointment book with appointments set, that's not what school social work really is.
So can you talk about, you kind of alluded to these, but what are some of the challenges that you faced at the beginning of your career, and how did you overcome them, or how are you still working?
I think it's very similar to what Kelly was sharing, in that sometimes we're looking for our roles to be very clearly defined and articulated, and sometimes they're not. And instead of being an obstacle, it's an opportunity to go into an environment and really do what we do as social workers, to do a needs assessment, to advocate for the population that you're working with, and to be really hands-on in your approach, and to be creative, and to bring people on board, and to seek out people who can do things that we can't do, whether it's educators, learning specialists, people who are familiar with grant writing, and that's how we grow, and that's how we can define our role as social workers. And oftentimes we're educating people every single day about what it means to be a social worker. We can do clinical work, we can teach, we can do preventative work, and that we're also capable of doing things like anti-bullying and special education, IEPs, and everything in between. We wear so many different hats, and so we're constantly learning and growing every day. There's nothing predictable about it. And that can be fun, and that can be stressful and challenging.
I agree. I think really the most challenging part is that you're in an environment that is a pedagogical environment. I'm not a pedagogue. So everyone there, for the most part, has some sort of teacher in them. The principal's been a teacher, the vice principal's been a teacher. So basically you're in a very small cohort of people that are not teachers by training. And you have to be sort of intrepid, I think, and work your way in and learn how a teacher thinks, and understand that the world's hardest job is to be a teacher. I could never ever do it, but to respect how hard it is and to understand what they go through and what they're trying to do. So where you think something like classroom management should be so easy because as a social worker it's about behavior, if you don't really understand teaching, you're missing a whole part of what's going on in that classroom. So I think the hardest part for me is really when I have no teacher experience, and learning to think like a teacher in a building filled with teachers has been a learning experience for me.
And also, everyone remember, if you do have any questions, you can just jump in. So, for students who are interested in doing the type of work that you do, what experiences or licenses or courses do you think you would recommend?
I think you need to have a clinical experience. I really value the time that I had in very critical mental health settings because it gave me the ability to assess very quickly, to triage, to treatment plan, and to do a lot of collateral care. And while being in a school is not necessarily a clinical setting, the role can be highly clinical in that we're the only mental health professionals in our setting. And so I've been called in to handle adult situations, if faculty were in crisis, or if there was a more systemic need, as well as issues that had to do with my students, peer issues, self-injury, eating disorders, depression, suicidal ideation, and really learning how to triage in that moment, how to work collaboratively with my nurses and with parents and faculty to train them to be able to see early warning signs. So really having that clinical background and then honing that each and every day is the best foundation I could have. I actually came back here and got a postmaster's in advanced clinical practice, and that really gave me just more finely tuned my lens and allowed me to do more development with faculty in giving them some skills to think like a social worker and learning skills how to think like a teacher. So I would certainly, you don't have to choose, you can do both.
I would say if you have the opportunity to go over to Steinhardt and take a class or two, that would be a great thing to do. In a special education class, because so much of the role of a social worker is surrounding special education, IEPs, child study team, words that I didn't hear all that often when I was here at NYU. I would say that the most important thing that I got from being here was an incredible sense of self-awareness and an incredible ability to leave myself at the door. And I think that when you work in a school, especially like I do, in a very high-needs environment, you have to be able to leave everything behind and just walk in there clean. And I think NYU offered me the ability to do that after 2 years of what was basically group therapy over and over and over again. But it really did. And I think that is the hardest part for some people, is not to personalize how kids act or how parents treat you. And to try and have empathy and to realize, especially in a high-needs environment, all the stressors that come with it, and that a school, especially where I am, is really a community center. And our role just becomes that much greater. So that for me would be the most important thing. I also did postmaster's work, but I got mine in supervision so that I can be a supervisor in our building. So supervising not just of social workers, but also of my special education teachers. And again, for someone with no special education training, I felt that was important to be able to understand the process. In terms of clinical work, unfortunately, I always say there's 505 students and just me. So I spend a lot of time doing referrals because there's just not enough time in the day to do the real clinical work that I'm so envious of some school social workers that they get to do.
So can you talk a little bit about your field placements and, even if they weren't necessarily related to school social work, how those, maybe both positive and negative experiences, how they helped prepare you for your roles now?
I think both of my placements were related to working with children and families, and really emphasized the idea that when you work with a child, you work with multi-systems, families, caseworkers, other specialists, and that's the model that social work uses. My first placement was in a community mental health clinic, and I had an opportunity to see a wide range of child and adolescent issues, and to work with their families, to work with their caseworkers, schools, etc., and really learn the case management aspect, but also what's considered within the range of normal healthy development and what's really considered pathological or of concern. So it gave me the opportunity to have more hands-on experience with child development and childhood disorders. My second placement was in a therapeutic nursery, and that was a younger age group. It's not my preference. It was ages 3 to 5. It was much more group work versus individual and family work, and it was much more acute. Children were more acutely symptomatic, and it was very challenging to see children that young with such pervasive and serious needs, and to look at the needs of families, the needs of communities, and the role of oppression in a lot of the work that I did. And so what it offered me was some kind of a foundation for work with children and what it means to do a lot of that advocacy and referral work and filling in gaps and working in crisis mode a lot of the time. So I think they were unique, they were strong for different reasons, and they also helped me develop areas of interest and areas where I think, maybe that's not for me right now. And that's okay. It was good to have that experience to know and to learn that about myself.
My first placement was at a homeless shelter for men with serious and persistent mental illness. The majority of them had schizophrenia. So I spent the majority of my first field placement scared. There were oftentimes threats, and it was a very dangerous kind of feeling. So I spent a good part of my first year placement kind of managing my own anxiety and trying to do some kind of good work. And the benefits of social media, my boss from there has found me on Facebook, and we had lunch last week, and I spoke to her about it. I was like, how did we ever survive that? She was like, I don't know, but she's still there. She was awesome. She was the best boss I ever had. But it did teach me a lot of self-care, which I never really thought much about, but it was very important in order to get through that, to have some sort of self-care. And it also taught me the role of having people to talk to and kind of work through my feelings. And I wasn't a big fan of process recordings, so I'm a talker, so it was a good place for me to just kind of sit and talk. That summer, I had an internship up at PI at New York State Psychiatric Institute, and it was awesome. I was still in with schizophrenia, with them with schizophrenia, but it was the complete opposite. And now it was this wonderful, caring environment with a host of doctors and psychiatrists, and they were so wonderful to the social workers, and they treated us so well, and the patients were so well cared for, that it kind of helped me get over my first trauma of that, and it almost had me thinking that that's what I wanted to do, until I went to my second placement, which was the best ever, and it was in a high school on the Lower East Side. And My supervisor was an older woman, which worked for me because I was older, and I don't think that I would have been really able to relate to someone much younger. I know she could never have. But it was one of those things that when I met her, I thought, this person is like one of the 5 people that you're going to meet that's going to change your life. And she was awesome. Crazy, awesome. So much fun. Learned more from her. Very deep. She was an analysis, so everything we did was very analytical, and we had to talk our feelings through all the time. And we would sit and have these conversations with students that were so deep and so meaningful, and I was so moved by how this woman, this 6'12" woman, could get these children to open up to her, and her analytic skills were just incredible. And that really solidified that I wanted to be a school social worker. My only disappointment was that I left there and really, really wanted to work in high school. And I work in elementary school, but it was an incredible, incredible experience of how to navigate your way through a building where you're the only person that isn't a teacher. And she was incredible.
Does anybody think of a resource? Here, actually, I have one of the questions, more on my head, but the one that I'm thinking about right now has to do with being the only social worker in the building. And I'll just preface this by saying that I came to social work school from special education. I was a learning specialist independently last before in school, but so I found some experiences as a consultant in charter schools and one social worker, a psychologist, school psychologist, that it's not enough. And I wonder, what your thoughts are on, are there ways to advocate to have more mental health professionals in school building, or is it just kind of as like not really a top? It's a priority, but on the list of priorities, it doesn't seem like it ever gets, never quite filters up. It's always pressed down like other concerns, and there's a lot of referrals outside the building.
There's 2 issues. The overriding one is budget. School is still business, especially charter school. So it's really about dollars and cents, and grant writing, and what you can use your money for and what you can't. The second is, by definition, of social workers, we'll just keep going and going and going, so we're almost often our worst enemy. I can do it, send it to me, I'm on it, no problem, I'll get it done. And so therefore, why have another one?
And we really are fortunate. We're both in one location, full-time. Many people I know who are involved in school social work, there may be one for an entire school district. They might be in a different building or 2 or 3 different buildings within one day. They may not have a private area to meet with students or to meet with families.
So it's worse than...
It's significantly
challenging. We're coming with the family and sitting on steps, so I get that.
Yeah, it's significantly more challenging. While I believe that mental health and wellness and prevention is a priority, in the bigger scheme of things, it's not seen, the idea of social emotional learning is still not a well-received concept. We're much more focused on the concept of STEM right now and developing pedagogy and curriculum to compete on a grander economic scale. And so again, it does go back to budget, priorities, funding. And we've been very, very fortunate to be able to do what we love in one place and to have an office that we can call our own, but that may not always happen. And so the self-care piece is big. We talk a lot about boundaries, having boundaries. Sometimes as social workers, it's very difficult to self-advocate, to say no. We want to do our best. We want to give our the most that we can. And burnout's a real threat in the work that we do, regardless of where we do it.
So as you're talking about, being a lot of times the only social worker, where do you go for advice or peer consultation?
I have peers in all different areas of social work, and so I use them for peer supervision. I used my own private therapy when need be. I think also teaching and having access to students who are studying and passionate. That's been a great way to refuel and to stay abreast of research and things that are happening, to stay current. And also having the ability, and Kelly talked about this, to be present and to go inward. We're constantly giving, we're constantly talking, we're constantly creating a strategy. And sometimes just letting things marinate is the hardest part of the work. Reflecting and feeling and processing and just sitting with that which can make us uncomfortable, because maybe there is no right answer. And using resources to be able to practice the radical acceptance that comes with that.
And I think that if it's a specific situation that I'm having a problem with, I have a wonderful relationship with my principal, and I'll just walk in her office and goes around, we gotta talk. I use my own private therapist, as you said, and then it's really just a network of friends, and there's two women that I'm friendly with from here, and we have our once a month shrink brunch, but truthfully really talk about personal problems, but we do sometimes talk about work, but I really find that, I learned something here at a PD that I did, and the woman said that children do crisis and adults do drama. And it stuck with me ever since. And what I find is the work and the things that I take home in my head are rarely about the students. It's usually about the adults in the building. And I think that that's, for me, the hardest part is stepping back from this, like, that teacher got, a better parking space than I did, and all the stuff that goes on. In terms of the students, while there are things that you hear that could just break your heart, to know that you're doing good work and to feel that you make a difference every day, for me, is enough fuel to keep me going. The things that get to me usually are adult-based.
So, kind of going off of that, sort of about professional development, are you guys part of any professional organizations, or how do you facilitate your own professional development?
This year I did 240 hours of professional development, so we're a charter school, so we have one day a month that's in-house professional development. Then I do one day a month out-of-house professional development, be it on bullying, special education, 504. I did a 3-day seminar here on clinical work with children. And then one morning a month, I go to a special education roundtable. So it all adds up. And the possibilities are endless. Did one at Rutgers last year on self-harm. So there are infinite possibilities of professional development, and I think they're important.
And finding good ones.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there. Find out, what your colleagues are doing, what other students are doing, so that because oftentimes you're coming out of pocket to pay for them. A school or an agency is saying, you go towards your transportation and lunch, tuition. I love the NASW. I think it's a wonderful professional resource. I've used it for things like liability insurance, just consultation. A lot of their webinars are interesting, so there's a lot that you can do. When I was in private practice, they had a whole section for people who are doing private practice, school social work, adolescents. That has been a great resource. I know being near other universities, they offer a lot of professional development in terms of day-long workshops. Take advantage of them. And maybe try something that you wouldn't normally be drawn to, because that's how you enhance your skill set, that's how you network. The Cape Cod Institute is a place where I go yearly, and they do a lot around trauma. They've had people such as Pat Ogden, Bessel van der Kolk, a lot around kind of neuroscience and trauma. So they're week-long, which is a really beautiful way to immerse and to go into depth with a lot of these issues from the people who are on the forefront of this field. They do a lot around kind of body-mind wellness as well, which is great if you're working in a school setting, because these are things that we can translate then to children, to families, and to the other adults in the building. And really looking at this idea of neuroplasticity and where that falls into learning and resiliency. So the Cape Cod Institute's a wonderful resource. But, look around. NYU has a lot to offer. That's a real gift of being part of this community and being an alumni. There's so much happening. It's a matter of sometimes of me just being able to get here. And the offerings are dynamic. They're, again, offered by some of the top people in this field. So chat, create your own peer supervision. Do your own research on a particular topic for your own professional growth. Don't be afraid to step outside the box. To lead into some discomfort as you go is what I also would say.
The only other one that I want to add is if you're really interested in school social work, a lot of the charter school companies, be it KIP or Achievement First, they do a lot of online professional development. Uncommon, which they do a lot of them. Eagle Academy does them, and they're just online webinars. Washington Academy, New Jersey, just did one on special education inclusion classes. So a lot of the big kind of networking schools do online.
I'll just throw a plug for me here. It's over the CTEC webinars all the time.
Yeah.
So we have a few alumni here. Can you talk about the job search and your own experiences and any advice that you have?
I was very fortunate. I was hired by my first year field placement, and that was the community mental health center. And I received beautiful supervision. I had a chance to do their program development. I did some grant writing, received some juvenile sex offender training, did in-home counseling, outpatient counseling, school-based programs. So that was really a chance for me to get my feet wet and to build skills. So networking is key, and sometimes being open to take a position that you're not so sure about, trusting your gut, but leaning into that, well, maybe I'm not sure if I'm totally qualified, but I'm going to go for it, because that's how you grow. And you learn. I love program development, or I'd rather be middle management, and that's okay. So you learn to build skills, and you learn to see yourself in different styles of leadership. And when you're in a school setting, you wear many different hats, and sometimes you are the expert and the leader, and you're navigating and calling the shots. Other times you're part of a team, and you're deferring to other people to make those bigger decisions. So it's important to have that flexibility as you go. Certainly, there are frustrations. I know teaching at the graduate level, a lot of my students are very worried about employment, paying back their loans, and they feel as though they don't have enough experience, and they feel very insecure going into interviews. Don't be afraid to brag about yourself, to market your skills that do translate, to highlight if you're multilingual, to highlight some of the professional development that you have received. Own it. You came from a top-rated social work program, and having been in this field and having done a lot of hiring over the years, I trust and know that NYU students are prepared. So you've already, you're one step ahead. So trust that you have a very strong foundation, and go in and own that and be proud of that, and speak about the other work you've done, other careers, other fields. It will all come together. That's the beauty of social work. It brings in business and education and child development and everything in between. So, a little swagger.
I can answer this question from two places. I sit on our hiring committee, so I can answer from that place, but I'll answer for how I found it out. I was very clear on what I wanted to do. And New York City had a hiring freeze time. And I knew that I wanted to work in an urban environment, and I really pretty much knew I wanted to work in New Jersey. And I went to Newark, got in my car, I went to every single charter school, and walked in the door and handed them my resume and my cover letter from the place of, first of all, I'm old, and that's how we used to do it. And I know you get thousands of them, and I'm just part of the herd. And I went to 14 different schools, and I got called for 10 interviews. So that would be my first piece of advice, is try and focus on something to do to stand out. And from that, I can say that in my school, I'm on the hiring committee. And we had a social work job available in middle school, and we got 75 resumes. So my first thing is you need to stand out, and not your cover letter. So the cover letter that everyone writes on the ideal, tell me something. Tell me something that I don't know. Tell me the reason why I want to work in Newark is because I grew up in Essex County and I've seen what's happened to that great city. Tell me something that sets you apart from the cover letter that everyone got at the place, I don't remember what it's called. Right, everyone's writing the same. Tell me something. Why do you want to work here? On your resume, if you have a 4.0 or a 3.5, put it there. You're going to a school. We care that you care about your GPA. If you have done anything, if you've been a fellow or a this, don't put it at the end. Put it at the top, because you're going to a school, and we want to see that you take school seriously also. Do not read your own resume or your own cover letter. Give it to someone else to read. There is grammar problems. There are commas in the wrong places. You have misspellings. Your spell checked it, but you wrote the wrong word, but it's still on your spell check. You're coming to a school. You need to have a perfectly written resume and cover letter that's grammatically correct. If you have any special skills, if you can be the science coach, if you love cheerleading, if you like African dance, put it on there. The fact that you filed for a really nice lady at high school is not half as important as what you tell me in that cover letter as why you want to work as a school social worker in my building. And if you're writing a letter to an urban school and to a suburban school, those letters should look nothing alike. If you have a professor that has given you a recommendation, include it when you submit it. Don't say references, furnish a common request. We're not going to request, go all in. Send them in. Send them in. If you've got your license, send it in. If you have a certification, send it in. Any commendation, send it in. Set yourself apart by saying, I'm great. I went to NYU, I'm great. You must meet me. And when you walk in there, everybody's nervous. Own it. I really want to work. I'm nervous. I'm sorry. It's okay to be nervous. Everybody is.
And if I could add to that, be polished, be professional.
Yes.
Come with a hard copy of everything you've submitted in the event that they don't have it or they have a larger group of people. Write a thank you note. Thank you notes go a long way. Yes, handwritten. We don't email, we don't text.
No.
Handwritten to everyone that you've met with.
Put your phone away during the interview and turn it off. Off. Not on buzz, off.
Yes, off.
And you went to your field placement in kind of like jeans and t-shirt? Come in a dress, come in a suit.
We've seen it all. So.
Yeah, and be able to speak about why you want to be in school. And really, the reason you want to be in school is because you love school. If you don't love school, you don't want to be in a school.
And leave your rescue fantasies.
I didn't like school, and I still don't like school, but I want to be in a school.
I don't think that you like being a student, but you love school.
I like the concept of it.
Okay, that's fine. But be able to articulate why.
Okay.
But you're right. Just don't be safe.
Yeah, leave the rescue fantasy in the door.
That's right.
Come as a professional who has a skill set and a certain degree of expertise and a willingness to work collaboratively in that setting.
I think, especially the school social worker, you want to talk about being a member of a team and respect that you have for teachers and when they ask you any questions, your questions are about the job, not about the hours, or if you get summers off, or if you're a parking lot, because there's a big break. So research the place. I mean, there's the internet. Go online. What is our vision? What is our mission? What do you think about them? Can you adhere to them? Do you have any questions? Well, yes, I read online that your vision is this. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by project-based learning? How does a social worker fit into your vision?
So,
Compare. The internet is the greatest thing ever. Research.
Do your research.
Do your research. Look up test scores. You know, part of the reason we're talking about in terms of funding, if there's money to be spent, it's on someone that can affect test scores. And while we can all think that a social worker affects test scores, everyone else can think a better teacher does. So, what are test scores? I couldn't help but notice that your scores went up 15% last year. What do you attribute that to? I see your scores are below average. What are you doing to make that better? Those are questions that you might have.
any questions?
So I have been looking at graduated in May. Thanks. And I don't know if there's such a thing as a part-time school social worker, but I kind of really want to divide my time up between the learning, the practice that I do as a learning specialist, school social work, and I also want to work toward my C. I've seen that there are jobs for part-time LCSW supervision, but it seems to me that I just noticed it in the last couple of days. It seems that my guess is that that's not for supervision towards like C, that's just supervision in the building for consultation and that kind of thing.
There are part-time school social worker jobs in New Jersey. I can't speak to New York, but I would imagine. In New York, your school social worker job is not going to get you towards your C. Period. In New Jersey, your school social worker job can get you to your C if there's for some reason supervision in that building, or you can pay for supervision outside that building. But as a part-time social worker, trying to get your C and paying for supervision, you're going to be doing that a long, long time.
I have another avenue actually for that, but which is relationships that I have with private practice working with for somebody to work with children that they don't see, but it's not sure. So I was curious if it was something that was an option in school social work.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that like per diem social work jobs.
I have another part-time. I'm full-time, and then after maybe 5 years in my position, I was able to get part-time to come in. But our roles are a little bit unique in that I'm also in the classroom, and we run the classroom kind of like a group wellness model. So we both have teaching and counseling roles.
Yeah, I read that in your statement. It sounded pretty interesting.
Yeah. But it's hard to come by. You really do have to be creative and think about your long-term vision as well and where that fits into it.
So I've been working in the last couple of weeks of getting the New York City, or New York State, school social worker certification, and New Jersey, so you don't know about that.
I will.
Oh, okay. So
New Jersey is much easier.
I'm part of the already because I've been in a DOE. I'm already online on the Teach thing.
Teach MSc.
And so I made the application, and fingerprinting went through from the past, and I just have to do the TASA. I've got everything else. But the only deficiency I have, which is reported actually online on that site, is my social work hours in the group program, my degree, and my supervision in my internship. And I have no way of figuring out how to get them that information because they're not taking phone calls, there's no place to email, and there's nothing in the FAQ. So any ideas?
Yes, go to Brooklyn and just hand it to them.
But it's the state, not the city.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Just go
to Court Street and say, here's my application, here's what's missing, here it is. Sometimes we get very lost in the all online concept, but it's like kind of the teller at the bank. Sometimes you gotta go.
So it's a walk-in center?
Yeah, of course, yeah. You'll be there for a while, but they're early.
There, yeah.
Any other questions? So not everyone here is an alum, we have some students. So for any students who are, about to start or who are starting their second year, do you have any advice for, based on your time here in Silver, any advice for how to, make the most of some of the opportunities that they have here in order to be better equipped for their jobs?
Self-care has to be a priority, and it has to be part of your lifestyle. It can't be once you crash and burn. So it has to be embedded into your routine. You know, you go to the gym, you wash your teeth, whatever, self-care. Because this is a very demanding program. It's a very demanding career path. We're constantly giving of ourselves. So really making self-care a part of your professional growth and development is key. Also, be open to exploring things that maybe you're not sure of while you're in school, or even when you're outside of school. Don't be afraid to go to a workshop that's a little bit unusual, or to attend something from another school, the School of Business or Arts, so that you can see how different things are connected, and it might inspire you in some way. Something I wish I did was I wish I took a business course, because if you choose to go into private practice, there's a lot of things that come your way that would be helpful to have. And talk to people who are doing what you hope to be doing. Maybe shadow them for a day if you can. Get an idea of what the reality of the work is about. And use that as an opportunity to ask questions. Interview people. Don't be afraid to ask somebody that you meet. Is it okay if I stay in touch with you? And can I call you and talk to you more about your position as a psychiatric social worker, or your position as a hospice social worker? It's a great way to just keep going.
I would say, to echo what you said, take a class outside of this building. I would go to Steinhardt, but that's just my experience. But social work is so much more than just being a social worker. We're very clinical here, and we're kind of like, in a nice clinical setting, here's what happens. The world is messy, so go out and find some mess, and go out and learn something else, and step outside and realize that it's not as neat and clean as we like it to say that it is here. Along those same lines, there's some professors here that really know school social work. I don't know if they're still here. Diane Grodney was a great help to me. She knew so much about children and adolescents and was so generous. He'll kill me, but Phil Coltop, who's right upstairs, is one of the most wonderful men you'll ever meet. So generous with his time, brilliant, and so helpful and so genuine. I don't know how long he's going to be here, so if you have not yet made his acquaintance, you should go upstairs and meet him. He's wonderful, and he ran Children's Aid forever, and he is a wealth of information and contacts, and just a genuinely lovely soul. In terms of shadowing someone, I couldn't agree more. You're all welcome to come to Newark and shadow me. You wouldn't be the first or the last. Most of them don't survive, but you're welcome to. It might shadow your vision of the big office and all that, but it is reality. And I think that if you can, if you are placed in a school, to step outside yourself and meet everybody in the school. Get to know the principal, get to know the dean, get to know the teacher of science, because they're all interconnected and they all know people. And the more people you know, the more people you'll meet. Have a LinkedIn profile, only if it's real. If it just says your name that you went to NYU, put some real stuff on there. People do look at you online. To that end, if you have a Facebook page, now's a really good time to clean it up. A really good time to clean it up. Or any other profile you might have online. You might want to Google yourself and see what comes up and clean it up. Because every employer does it. So, and I would also be able to, I'm sure you're going to take child abuse prevention here, but I think you also want to be really, really mindful of your role as a mandated reporter and learn what that means, and learn the difference between being an investigator and being a reporter, and be able to speak to that. And at this point, if you're still here and you're still lucky enough to be in school, I would try and meet every person I could. And every person that came in here, any opportunity I had to meet a person that is outside of me as a social worker, I would meet them and get their card, contact information, whatever it is.
So are there any other questions? Well, if you would be able to stick around just for a minute in case there are questions. And thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.